Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Keith Johnson.
You're all a bunch of dinks.
And Veronica Dashel.
You stole my ending. I only had one planned. Sorry, guys, you're going to hear it again.
Yeah, sorry, guys. We started a few minutes late. We're having some technical difficulties tonight, but we're going to be getting into some TV movies / pilots that were created by Gene Roddenberry after Star Trek in the early 70s. But first, Keith, did we have any This Week in Trek this week?
I do have a couple of them, so let me grab that real quick. Not a lot. I always like to say there's not a lot happened back then. But this is all pretty much some classic Trek. I think this is actually pretty relevant because we're talking about Gene Roddenberry and we're talking about some of the stuff he had done. On the 9th of February, back in 1967, one of my favorite episodes, I just had seen talked about a lot in some Facebook groups, and that is the famous Red Hour.
Okay.
And you know that one.
I do. Return to the Archons.
I mean, what are those movies that have been popular for the last few years where people get to go crazy once a year and tear up the world?
The Purge.
The Purge, yeah. Return to the Archons was like the Purge before the Purge, really. It was
right.
This weird thing where they had returned to a planet that a Federation starship had visited years before. Turned out the whole civilization being run by a computer that was modeled after Laundry. And the computer, I guess like the Matrix, had assumed that it needed to keep people controlled most of the year. But every now and then it let them go wild. And boy, did they.
Yes, they did. They did.
There's always a funny scene to hear everybody talk about. I don't know how well you remember the show, but there's always that weird dude they find, and when he's the one, he talks real strange, and he's the one that goes, "Come for the festival, yeah." And it's just really weird. It's an interesting show. I like it. I like the technology. It is also one of the ones that furthers the whole meme because Kirk literally talks to the computer into blowing up at the end because he puts it in a logic loop. That's Kirk for you.
Right.
And then we had another one, 1968, February 9th, 1968, was Kirk again, and that was an episode called Return to Tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's relevant for a couple of reasons. One, it stars Diana Muldaur.
Yes, it does.
Gets possessed or taken over or allows her body to be taken over by this incredibly powerful being called Felice, who is one of 3 people, right, who survived this incredibly advanced race of people who destroyed their planet with their own mental issues. I love the episode because Leonard Nimoy gets to be really bad. He plays Henoch.
Right.
I really like that character.
Yeah.
Kind of sucks they got rid of him at the end. That's another good. Moving ahead, this is really relevant, I think, for Black History Month, which I think we can still talk about. Are we okay to talk about that?
They haven't stopped us yet.
Right, we're gonna shut down right in the middle of talking about Black history. February 1998 was the classic Deep Space Nine episode Far Beyond the Stars.
Okay.
The absolute classic one where haven't seen it, where Cisco is basically feeling that he doesn't know if he can go on with it, or it's getting to him, and then the prophets treat him to this really wild vision of what it was like centuries before, deals with a lot of racism and so forth. Really excellent episode. Also acted by, not just lead actor was Avery Brooks, but he directed that episode.
Right.
And cast members say, knowing Brooks, he's already intense, they said it took him a long time to come down. Long time. Keep that actor.
Yeah, that's one of the all-time great episodes.
It really is. It's really deep, and I think very relevant nowadays too.
Yeah.
Very relevant. And the last one, we talked about this before. This goes on my list of Star Trek episodes. I hate very few Star Trek episodes. I didn't love this one as a kid, and the older I get, the more it means to me, even though it's got a logic flaw. And that's the 14th of February, 1969 was the premiere of Requiem for Methuselah.
Okay.
I have really come to love that episode, even though it falls in love in like 2 seconds, and his whole crew is going to die in a couple hours, but he's trying to make time on a planet. You know, it's a weird thing, but Flint, the character Flint, is really good, and it's one of those where there's a lot of stuff in the episode that's not great. Moments with Flint and especially the reveal. Even though there's some logical gaps with the reveal, because he said he was Moses, and my gosh, a whole bunch of people. But just a great episode.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then that turned us on to The Man from Earth.
Yes.
Which we did and reviewed last year.
Right.
Right, by the same author, and that was also very good, about a guy in modern time, our times, who tells a group of his friends that he is immortal. And very interesting episode. Very interesting, because some people are cool, and there's one guy who's kind of like freaking out. You think he might kill the guy just because.
Yep.
And that's This Week in Trek History.
All right. Now we've got a couple of comments. Mark said, use the Guardian of Forever and go back to start on time. And sorry about that, Mark. We're battling some technical difficulties tonight.
Yeah,
Wayne chimed in that he's having a difficult time hearing you, Keith.
Which is part of our technical difficulties, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on. I have switched computers. I'm still having trouble.
Okay.
Was it any better the first time it was bad?
No, just I think if you can get closer to the mic and speak up, then maybe that will help.
Let's do that.
The joys of live streaming, everybody.
Yay.
Okay. Any better?
That's that. Yeah, I can hear you a little bit better there.
Okay. Sorry,
All
guys.
right.
I've tried 2 different computers, so I don't know what's going on today.
Yeah. So the plan tonight, though, is to talk about Genesis 2 and Planet Earth. That's a 1973 and 1974 TV films, which were also pilots that Gene Roddenberry was trying to get off the ground in the early 70s after he made Star Trek. And we thought it'd be fun to talk about them and look at some of the connections, because they have quite a few Star Trek connections, but also looking at sort of what Gene Roddenberry was trying to put out there as science fiction. You know, I mean, Gene, obviously by that time, he was becoming well known, traveling around, talking on, at college campuses. Sort of the cult of Gene was developing at that point, and Star Trek was becoming very popular in the reruns. So clearly, Gene Roddenberry saw the wisdom in trying to segue that popularity with science fiction audiences into additional projects. And he made several attempts. We're going to be talking about 2 of them tonight because they're pretty closely interrelated. What did you want to do? Do you want to talk about one and then the other, or just talk about them interchangeably?
I think we need to talk about one and the other, because I mean they have a lot of the kind of the same characters, and one of them is kind of a continuation of the other one, but not exactly.
Okay.
But I think they're very, very, very different movies.
That's true.
That works.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, I saw these when they premiered on TV movies. So my memories go back to childhood watching these. Let's just say they don't land quite as well as they did when I was a kid. But when did you guys first see these?
The last couple of days.
Yeah, you'd never seen them before.
No.
I would have seen these. I would have. I watched them. I'm sure I downloaded them off of Kazaa or something. Back in probably I would guess the early 2000s. I don't remember seeing these aired on television, even on the Sci-Fi Channel. But I know that I sought them out at some point. I watched all of the old Gene Roddenberry stuff, which I would have been downloading back when it would take you like 172 hours to download a film, and then it would come up in a little square box, like a little quick time video in the middle of your screen. That's probably how I first saw this, but I hadn't seen these in a number of years. We just recently got the double feature Blu-ray for these 2 films, so we got to watch them at full resolution, which was nice.
I think I realized I haven't seen these in like 40 years.
Wow.
But I remembered almost every detail. But when I was coming up, we talked about before, there used to be TV movies of the week and stuff. There used to be much. Right. ABC does that every now and then, kind of a nostalgia kick. And I watched these and they premiered. And I remember, we'll get into it, but I remember being so fascinated by the shuttle. I still, we'll get into it.
Right.
The other. So they're not quite as good watching them now as an adult. They're a little cheesy, but they're still. I had a good time.
Yeah. No, I think there's good things about them. Then they both have they're similar. It's like watching, I guess, kind of like Star Trek, where you have like 2 pilots trying to get this idea off the ground. Only in this, they kept the same main character's name of Dylan Hunt for both of them. the first one feels more like a science fiction movie of the week to me, where it sort of starts off in the present day, well, near future, I guess, for the time, like 6 years in the future. And then Dylan Hunt, of course, I mean, immediately when you step into a cryogenic or suspended animation chamber, there's going to be an earthquake that buries the lab. You know what I mean? See you in 6 months, guys. Like, no, it's going to be like 400 years before you wake up, buddy.
Yes, an earthquake that buries the bare-chested, hairy-chested dude with the 1970s mustache. Now, Alex Cord, that actor, back in the day, was kind of the man. He was always showing up in movies and TV movies. You might remember him as, I forget the guy's name from the series Airwolf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was fine. I thought he did a good job. I will get to it in a little bit later, but I liked John Saxon as a lead better than Alex McCord.
Yes.
But I did.
So you made a good point, Charles, about, of course, there's an earthquake. I love this. They have built like this super, which I still love, this supersonic sub transport, right? They've created this new pressurized blah blah blah. They got this incredible suspended animation gas, and he goes, "Yeah, we had no idea there was a flaw right here when we built this entire thing."
Oops, we built it on a fault line. I'm sorry, guys.
Great. And what was funny is, I wrote in my notes that, kind of like you said, it's almost like this came off more as like an outline of a movie, like almost like it's the version they film before they really add all the music and go back and touch it up, because the camera shook and the two scientists go earthquake and they run out and that's it. They didn't say, "Oh, we gotta save Dylan." They just
sorry, Dylan. Every man for himself.
Yeah, and it was like 154 years later. It was great.
You're right. Yeah. Well, I think probably the most famous thing from this movie has got to be Mariette Hartley in the bikini with two navels. So, Veronica, let me throw it to you first. That's the woman in this conversation.
I mean, it's a nice, easy way to make her be a mutant. And the fact that you couldn't show your navels and now all of a sudden they were allowed to, and now there was two of them. It would have probably been more shocking had I been of that era. But it was just one of the most ridiculous. Hey, this is not a regular human type of things.
Well, I'll tell you, Veronica, being around when watching it when it came out, trust me, it got a lot of talk for a lot of reasons. And it was, "Oh, did you see that? They showed two navels." Because to your point, Star Trek gave him grief for showing navels, of course, in the original series, which was what it was about. And even at that time, in I Dream of Jeannie, Barbara Eden wasn't allowed to show her belly button. And so, Gene Roddenberry literally said, been recorded many times, he said, they gave me grief for trying to show one belly button on Star Trek, so I got him, I'm going to show two. Interesting.
Right. The thing I thought of while watching this, and this is kind of out of left field, I guess, but remember Into Darkness? When Alice Eve, there was a scene where Alice Eve sort of gratuitously just like stripped down to her underwear.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that people point out, was like, that's not what Star Trek would do.
Well,
I think Gene Roddenberry would actually be okay with it, because this whole movie really has a bit of that Gene Roddenberry horniness to it.
Yes. Yeah. I wrote that too, Charles. I wrote, this is showing Gene Roddenberry's predilections, because people may know famously that this is not a joke, that when The Next Generation came out, Gene Roddenberry had talked about having Deanna Troi have 4 breasts.
Right.
And the other shoulders, like, Gene, seriously, why? I mean, what's the point? And you're right, because it was almost like a Skinamax, because she walks in and she says, "I'm a mutant." Okay, cool. 2 hearts or 2 whatever. And then she drops to her bikini. What? And you really want to cue the bad porn music, bow, chicka, bow, wow.
Yep.
It was weird.
Dylan Hunt seemed okay with it, though.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, he was fine.
Chuck and I were having a conversation about how if a half-naked mutant had come along and he'd believe the half-naked mutant.
Dylan Hunt would?
Dylan Hunt would. But you said you would.
I would?
Yes. that you would go along with half naked music.
Oh, because you're talking about how like which side should he be on?
Oh yes.
And like, no, I mean I'm going to go on Marriott Hartley's side. You know, I just showed up in the future. I have I have no idea about the geopolitics that are going on. But no, I'm probably with them. I'm going to take Marriott Hartley's side.
At first, I was on her side as well because the brief glimpse into that world that we got, they were psychos. And they were worshiping Freud. So I was like, yep, you gotta get out of there.
Right.
Get out of there. Fast you can.
You talking about Pax?
Yeah.
Now, why is that? What
because that one girl who was watching over him, she was going on about how Saint Freud and that I don't remember exactly because I don't remember things, but it was all a little okay, let's get him out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what they were doing I thought was very interesting. Charles, you mentioned it still kind of throws back is that was absolutely Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek tropes because what was her name? Hopper. She was there. She was all about how our passions destroyed us, which is kind of a Gene Roddenberry thing, you know,
right.
Except saying that our baser natures destroyed us and we couldn't control. They also said something I thought was very interesting, which would actually be kind of relevant now, or at least a discussion. They talked about how many people have become what they call unisex. And the way they said it, that unisex almost came off more like celibate than any other thing. And I thought it was very interesting because when they got on later to the Turanian city, Marriott Hartley's Lyra Ogg, love that name, Lyra Ogg, also kind of talked about how emotion was bad. And so interestingly, both cultures kind of sort of said emotion was bad. Of course, we know Gene Roddenberry didn't feel that. He felt that emotion and being quote unquote really human was good. He could control them. So I thought it was very interesting that both of the cultures were like that.
Right. Let's grab some comments real quick. And Mark had a comment about Requiem for Methuselah that we'll come back to here in just a minute. But our buddy Wayne, Tigerblood 2002, says, yes, the subject matter comes across today can make us cringe. And
Amen.
Went on to say that I believe the naval scene was Roddenberry's way of snubbing his nose at the censors from Star Trek's time.
Yep.
And don't forget about the sexy pancreas.
Oh, did you have to bring that up?
And then Mark commented, the fault line was no one's fault.
Yes, it was.
Well, let's talk about some of the Star Trek actors who were in this. Keith, you're familiar with Percy Rodriguez?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I wrote something about him recently. Percy Rodriguez for me is a big deal because he played Commodore Stone in the Star Trek episode Court Martial.
Right.
Let's just say him wearing that hippie peace medallion and those robes. I thought Commodore Stone. It was so wild.
Yeah. No, I thought he was stronger as Commodore Stone. I don't think that this was his fault. Yeah. It was he was playing a different character.
Yeah.
But I loved seeing him again.
Yeah, same here.
I gotta say that I got really excited about Ted Cassidy. I love when anytime Ted Cassidy shows up in anything. And he was great in this. And obviously, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wrote, what the heck is a white Comanche?
I know.
They said you're a white Comanche warrior, right? I'm like, okay.
I mean, it's been 350 years. You never know what happens.
Yeah.
And then you had Majel Barrett as Primus Dominique.
Right.
And of course, it's great every time you see her. You know, I mean, I didn't think that her role didn't blow my socks off in this or anything like that. I mean, but I think the best role she ever played was Loxana Troy. That was perfectly suited for her. But I thought she was fine in this, and it was nice to see her. And of course, Marriott Hartley. Like I said, Marriott Hartley is really the standout, I think, amongst them. But she also had sort of the standout part. Like she was the more prominent character. But I think when you're watching this, it might be a little surprising how little she's in it, sort of as far as the runtime goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of Marriott Hartley, that was interesting. You mentioned about her, Veronica, because I wrote down in my notes that Dylan wasn't very bright. Because she speaks in the room and says, yeah, they're really warmongers, and why don't you leave with me? And he just leaves, and I didn't get that because I didn't see that they did anything overtly to make him feel that way. I didn't get what was going on there.
Yeah, for me it was just the fact that they were worshiping Freud was a little.
Well, I will tell you, in the 70s, still people didn't realize what a freak Freud actually was. At least they didn't talk about it as much. So back in that day, Freud was still quoted a lot. Then during the 70s and 80s, people started really, really looking at Freud, and they're like, "Hey, I think Freud's kind of out there." Yeah, so I didn't think she gave him enough reason to leave, even if he had questioned him, said, "Hey, guys, I want to really know what's going on here," but he just like left in the middle of the night because she told him to, because she said, "Yeah, they're really bad, and I'm a spy from the Terrarians," and it's like, okay, let's go. I guess because she'd been, as he said, euphemistically tucking him in every night.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if Marriott Hartley told me to come, I would go. All right. So Tony commented, Marriott Hartley will be at Monsterama, that's in Atlanta, in August.
Awesome.
And of course, if you're a Star Trek fan, you know Marriott Hartley played Zarabeth in All Our Yesterdays.
Yes.
And she was fantastic in that. I mean, I think she's one of the very memorable characters from the original series. And that's, I mean, I think All Our Yesterdays should have been the series finale for the original series. I think several of those seasons they just stopped, you know, one extra episode early. Then I think it would have worked out. And then our buddy Bill Lamond has joined us and said, "Sorry, I'm late. Stupid Windows chose 7:55 p.m. to insist on restarting it to install endless updates."
You know that feeling.
That's all right, Bill. Yeah, we're fighting some technical issues on our side as well, but we're carrying on. All right, so let's swing back around to Mark's comment about Requiem for Methuselah. And he said, Requiem for Methuselah, Spock knows what is behind that door, and he tries to stop Kirk from going through. Gets me every time.
Same here.
All right, so let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll get a little into Planet Earth, and then maybe do some comparing and contrasting, because they're really interesting watches when we watch them 2 nights in a row. So we'll be right back in just a minute, so stay right there.
Welcome to Stellar Fest, where we're celebrating the worlds you love, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Doctor Who, and beyond. Dive into an immersive weekend of cosplay, panels covering your favorite sci-fi fandoms, RPGs, themed activities, and out-of-this-world merchandise. Don't miss your chance to connect with fellow fans and celebrate the universe's greatest sagas. Get your tickets now at stellarfest.org.
And we're back. Yeah, if you're in the Atlanta area, I mean, definitely check out Monsterama in August, but also we'll be at Stellar Fest here in just a couple of months. And yeah, the weekend of April 4th through 6th will be, I'll be running the Star Trek track, and Alan, who couldn't be here tonight because he's off Doctor Whoing, will be running the Doctor Who track. And it's going to be a fun time. We're gonna have a lot of fun there.
One thing I did want to mention real quick, we'll talk about them both of them. Also, coming up, I was a kid watching this, and I grew up watching all this stuff when it was first aired. So many things there were absolute tropes of sci-fi from the 60s and 70s. The suspended animation, which they were doing because they were which frankly we still could look at nowadays for long-term space voyages. That was a big thing back then. Of course, the post-apocalyptic Earth was a big thing back then. And of course, Gene Roddenberry with the whole Pax, which of course means peace. That was kind of cool. I thought it was pretty cool. Oh, and the one thing I did mention, I wrote down was a joke, because I remember this as a kid. I wrote down "Your agonizer, please" when they brought out the stems.
Right.
Because stems are great.
Yeah. Well, let's transition over and talking about Planet Earth a little bit here, because I mean, to me, it really feels like 2 attempts at a pilot for a show. You sort of using the same ideas, reworking it a little bit, kind of like they did with Star Trek. And I mean, with the exception of the recasted characters, you really could have done the same kind of thing they did with The Cage, where they sort of rejiggered it to be in the Star Trek universe and as part of the history. I think they were smart with Star Trek, whether they knew it or not at the time, to change the name of the captain. You know what I mean? Because if Jeffrey Hunter had also been playing Captain Kirk, it would have been a lot more difficult to reuse that footage. But here we have John Saxon taking over the role of Dylan Hunt. But one of the things they doubled down on was Ted Cassidy's character of Isaiah. Which Mark comments that White Comanche was a spaghetti western starring William Shatner in a dual role. But yeah, you mentioned the White Comanche character from Genesis 2, and that's one thing they kept going into what I'm calling the second pilot, but going into Planet Earth.
Yeah. And one thing to Ted Cassidy, one thing I remember from seriously not having seen this in at least 40 years, I remember the scene when Ted Cassidy was praying because it stayed with me, and when the lady she was basically a little frustrated, she was to not pray, and then the other guy being on his side, however, says, "Let the savage pray." Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And that other guy was Baylock.
I don't think anyone was called. Oh, there was a Baylock. You're right. I couldn't find it in the credits. But yeah, we kept thinking we heard someone referred to as Baylock. But then I watched the end credits and it wasn't there. So he must have been at the beginning credits. But that's interesting that character's name was Baylock.
But that's kind of another Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek thing, which is not that they put down religion, but they don't embrace it like that. So I thought, again, you can't say that was pro or anti-religion. It was what it was, although it did associate it with kind of the primitive guy.
Right. Yeah, Next Gen would go on to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But in this one, we had John Saxon taking over the role of Dylan Hunt, and we already kind of alluded to this, but I mean, I thought he was a much better lead than Alex Cord was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. He came off as much more of an Indiana Jones adventure kind of.
Yeah.
Because he's still a scientist. He's like this. Obviously, from the first movie, he goes into like a 150-year-old nuclear facility and brings it to blow up, and he blows it up. So the guy's like a super genius. He's like Bruce Banner. He knows, he knows nuclear bombs. He knows electronics. He knows medicine. But yeah, he reminded me of watching him in Enter the Dragon because he even did some of the same kicks. But yeah, John Saxon just holds the screen better than Alex Ford, no doubt.
Yeah, he's kind of Kirkian, I thought. Yeah. I thought that I could have seen William Shatner in that part because, I mean, he was, I mean, these stories are set on Earth, but that's that 1970s trope. You see it in Planet of the Apes and Logan's Run as well, where it's like, it's, after the fall of our civilization, and there's little pockets of different civilizations. You can imagine that, in this one, they're traveling to a matriarchal society, like an Amazon woman society. But you imagine they probably would go to, one week they'd be in a futuristic society, and one week they'd be in a pilgrim society or whatever,
Yeah. And probably definitely be some ethnic societies too. That would be, one group. Yeah, I thought that was a good point too. And of course, back in the day too, because we've seen it before, is one of the most sci-fi tropes at the time was the woman rule, the matriarchy. They call like the Amazons, which they actually alluded to in Genesis 2.
Okay. I'm gonna go over to our female correspondent again real quick. Veronica, what did you think of the matriarchal society portrayed in this movie?
They were psychos.
Oh, okay.
I
Wait a minute, you said Pax was psychos.
Everybody's psychos.
Well, they seemed to be psychos based on the limited knowledge I had at the beginning of Genesis 2.
Okay.
But no, like they were literally drugging their men, and it was clearly proven that this was like making their society fall because they couldn't have kids because the men were being sterilized, basically. I mean, I get what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And why they did that, but
I thought
people just go too far, and that was the problem before, was people went too far, but they went too far in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. There's a nice middle ground there where it can lean one way or the other a little bit, but I'm
a little relieved that you don't approve of their methods.
No.
I could drink my drinks in peace.
Next time y'all cook oatmeal, Veronica, Chuck's gonna be pouring it out.
Yeah, I'm not. If she serves me gruel, I'm not eating it. But no, I mean, it's very 70s, I thought, and pretty Gene Roddenberry. There was some commentary in there, pretty heavy-handed commentary that like the men can't run a society, and the men, which I mean, fair. If you read history, that holds up.
You read the news today,
right? Yeah, unfortunately, I do. But also because it's Gene Roddenberry, it's also fetishized a bit in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, if you have like the strong woman who's in charge of the men, then you have like the lead has to like be the one to break her of it. You know what I mean?
Like Khan dominated Guyver. Yeah, and then I did write in my notes that the whole scene of getting Marg getting her drunk went on so long. It just went on, and it kept talking about the balance. And dude, seriously, it just went on. And
they could have easily cut 5 minutes out of that.
Well, I think if the seduction was effective for the audience, I think that scene would have been fine. But for me, the feeling was like the people making this are more into it than I am. You know what I mean? Like I'm not being titillated by this, so it's not really working and not have the desired effect.
You know, it's something really weird. She said one thing that unfortunately in real life, because we talk about real life slavery and stuff we know has happened. She actually said one thing that I said we didn't get from Section 31, not that I want to give any reference to that, is when the door shut, and it's real creepy, she then said, oh, you can basically look me in the eyes and you can speak and all that stuff. Basically, and my wife is watching this, she's like, oh, Lord, we know what she wants, right?
Right.
Basically, that's what I was saying was missing from Section 31, which is behind closed doors, if nothing else. You do whatever, equal, whatever. Maybe it's even a fantasy of her to have a strong man. And then when the door opens, it's a different thing. So I thought, to your point, Chuck, it was something that could have been interesting, but then they just took it. And I started getting shades of Scotty and that dude and by any other name that he was getting drunk. It just went on a loop, and it got a little silly. And then anytime somebody pretends to be drunk, it's always kind of silly anyway.
Right.
So it's working.
Yeah, and we should point out that Marg was played by Diana Muldaur, who, of course, she was in 2 episodes of the original series, and then she was in the 2nd season of Next Generation as Dr. Pulaski, which I love. I think she's great. I think I like her a lot, and so I really like seeing her here. Even if I have some qualms about the role and the way that she was being portrayed.
Yeah.
All right, a couple of comments here. Wayne says, hence cringe, and then said, yeah, Veronica, some serious paranoia exhibited. And he also said, about Planet Earth, I had many flashbacks from the Mad Men TV series. That show explains so much about growing up in baby boomer America. Yeah, I agree with that. I see what they were going for with it, but for me, it was a miss with this matriarchal society. Which obviously you shouldn't drug people, but also, I think that the heavy-handed commentary just didn't really land, and the sexual titillation part of it didn't really land. I did like, I forget her name, his little buddy, who, it was her job to sort of pretend to be his owner, and then she immediately lost him. And Harper Smythe, is that who she was?
Yeah, one of the characters that went between both series, but not the same actor.
Right. And then she came back and got in a fight. I thought, I liked her arc. I thought she was the best part about this.
Yeah.
Right. I thought, I agree with you, it was really heavy-handed, but I thought what was incredibly, uncomfortable, but it was realistic, because again, in American slavery, this also happened, was this casual way they talked about drugging men. Mm-hmm. And then the casual way they looked at these men, and like her main guy, she basically said he was dumb as a stump, but he seemed to have his uses. And the way they were kind of really excited, nor the way to say it about breeders. Mm-hmm. And again, if you think about that being in the early 70s, again, I was there when I watched it, that landed much differently, because now we've seen so much, and sexuality and everything is way beyond that. But when that first came out, and they even threw out a term which was still being used back in the day, women's lib. Mm. And so when this landed, it came out, I remember it actually did generate some talk in sci-fi circles, because it was like, look at these women. And then for the women, it was a big deal for women in that time to be that openly sexual. Mm. Because while they kind of talked about having kids, but that's not what they were talking about this time. They said breeders, but they sure seemed like they were going to enjoy being. Well, I didn't say it that way. They were going to enjoy the act.
Right. Now, there was a line in this where he said, women's lib or women's lib was it run amok or whatever? I can't remember now how he phrased it.
Right.
But so I mean, was the implication here, was this what could happen if women's lib goes too far? They'll be all the way in charge. I mean, is this a cautionary tale about women's lib?
Yeah, but I thought that too, but I thought he said something very interesting. He also said something to the effect of it had been too far the other way, I guess, when men were in charge.
Right.
And then we didn't want to go too far. So that's when he kept babbling about balance. So I thought that was an interesting thing they were trying to say there. I think they were trying to thread the needle and say maybe we should just be equals. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Same here.
Okay. I mean, I don't really think that painting I don't think that we have a danger of women's lib going too far so that we're all drugged and work in the fields. But no, I do like the idea of using that to contrast the patriarchy, which is the society we had up to now, which, you know what I mean, that really is it's sort of showing the inverse. Didn't land as well some of the times that Star Trek did it to me.
No.
All right, so we've got a comment here from Mark that says Dinah Muldaur is a favorite and a professional. Always liked her in every role. Yeah, I agree with that.
Golden screen, definitely.
Now, something that was introduced in this one was the Krieg. What'd you think of the Krieg?
Oh boy.
Hayes taped to their face or something and they were falling off, and they all had this weird, really dark, deep voice, and they talked like robots. I was like, what are you doing? And they were all almost blackface too. It was really disturbing.
Yeah. Well, they were yet another group of mutants. There was a whole bunch of mutants running around in this world. So obviously it was a nuclear war, because they were he said they were mutants, and then they said they babbled something about they only respected technology, I think, and violence or something like that. And the main one, what they keep calling him, Captain General or Captain, whatever that weird way. That guy, if you go back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, was that guy who played a bad guy in everything back then. So like Policewoman, Cannon, you name it, Barnaby Jones, Mannix, he was there. And so as soon as I saw him, I thought, oh yeah, but you're right, Veronica. I actually laughed out loud the way they talked. And then that weird pre-Roadrunner thing with the wood-burning cars was kind of funny. I mean, it landed differently.
Like, how, I don't,
that's pretty sophisticated. If you can find an old car and convert it to run on wood-burning steam, that's pretty sophisticated.
It is.
The thing that jumped out the thing that jumped out to me about the Krieg was the ridges, which this is just a few years before, like 5 years before Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which gave Klingons ridges. So I'm wondering if this was like the proto Klingons as far as the makeup goes, because the motion picture Klingons had that spinal cord looking singular ridge, which these guys did as well to a lesser extent. I wonder if we had seen Star Trek back on TV and the Star Trek Phase 2 they're trying to get off the ground, if we could have seen Klingons that were more similar to these Krieg.
I never thought about that. They kind of reminded me of the Cro-Mag in From Crossing the Streams and Sliders.
Yeah, I thought so too. The Cro-Mags, specifically from season 4, because when they brought the Cro-Mags back, and they were sort of doofy guys in Nazi uniforms, but with Cro-Mag makeup, not the cool like alienish Cro-Mag from the previous season. But no, I had the same thought. These guys reminded me of the Cro-Mags from the 4th season of Sliders.
Yeah. One thing I think is very interesting, again, I say this again, I'm going back 50 years when I saw this, is if you notice, like every other word out of their mouth was a mutated race, a mutated plant, a mutated something. It's funny, nowadays we talk a lot, and a lot of our science fiction is post-apocalyptic. But believe you me, and plus Charles, because you've watched a lot of it. Back in the day, every freaking movie was about post-nuclear war Holocaust or post-germ warfare Holocaust. Right. So this was everything. There was those bad series, Arc 2 and stuff like that. That's what it was then. It was we were going to nuke ourselves, release a virus, or completely destroy our resources and fall back to the Dark Ages. So it's so familiar.
Well, that's the thing about science fiction, is it's not about the future. It's about today. So just like today, you get a lot of stuff about gene splicing gone wrong, or AI gone wrong, or climate change, like the things that are on people's minds. And then I think also what good and bad science fiction does is sort of take the things that are in the public consciousness and then extrapolate them into the future, as sort of a warning of where we could go. So Wayne commented, Soldier Commander was the term.
Thank you, Wayne. That was it. Soldier Commander.
Right.
I laughed every time they talked. I got it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing that also about these, the second one, Planet Earth, was directed by Mark Daniels, who we know from Star Trek. The first one was not. The first one was by John Llewellyn Moxey. But also the costuming for both was by Bill Tice.
I could tell that when Lyra Ah went back to her home and she put on that outfit and she turned around and it was like all the way down. And I told my wife, I said, yeah, that's got to be William Teese, that outfit. Right. And then she said, it wouldn't be all that shocking nowadays, but back in the day, that's a big deal. Yeah,
that was sort of his claim to fame was specifically with the female costumes of draping fabrics in creative ways and giving the illusion that if you turn the wrong way, or maybe not an illusion, they had tape on there, but if you turn just the wrong way, maybe that thing's gonna fall right off. They had
that on some of the men's costumes.
Yeah, the men's costumes in the first one, in Genesis 2, were very much like future togas. Whereas in the second one, I thought the uniforms were actually pretty cool. I think those would have worked for like a Star Trek. Those PAX uniforms they had on, I thought those were pretty good.
Yeah.
Of the two, I prefer the uniforms over the space togas.
Yes.
Veronica, what did you think of the space togas?
They were so ridiculous.
I shouldn't say space togas because they were on Earth the whole time.
They were totally space togas though.
They were Earth source togas.
They were terrible. They were a terrible design. Not because they were a terrible design, but it was like it was stupid and not functional at all.
Well, but if this story was set in like 1000 BC, like in the Roman Empire, would you have thought those togas were?
Yes.
Okay, you're not a toga person.
Not when there's a weird like pointy thing that goes down just between your groin, and then it goes up to these giant shoulders, and then swoops back off of that. That is completely and totally ridiculous.
I agree. They were almost Zardoz bad.
I don't have a problem with togas. Those were not togas.
They reminded me of they reminded me of the outfit Adam wore in The Way to Eden. And I actually laughed. And I was thinking, if you didn't have that stem in your hand, people would be making fun of you, dude.
All right. So Tony commented, toga. Well, what did you think of I'm guessing it had to just be a cost-saving measure of having the Krieg wear the helmets, unless you were specifically highlighting one with the ridges. So they don't have to put makeup on all the extras.
Yeah, that looked kind of lame to me. I started thinking, I wrote down that reminded me of Devo, early Devo or something like that. And then Ted Cassidy came in and banged two of them together, and I thought, he banged their helmets together.
Now, I did notice in the credits that Bob Justman was the producer on the second one, Planet Earth.
Yes, he was.
I would love. Bob Justman was famous for his memos. I would love to see his memos regarding these.
Oh yeah.
But I wonder how much of this was Bob Justman's input and the things that the second one I thought was more action adventure. And I thought it had more the feel of a TV show, that it could go on as a continuing action adventure series. Even though I don't necessarily, the Amazon Society didn't really do it for me, but I could see this group of characters having future adventures. Although I think Ted Cassidy's character is one of the things they should have reworked.
Yeah, and you can feel to your point, you can feel some of the Star Trek influence, because when he told the dude to basically Vulcan mind meld the guy to see if he could help him. I mean, he literally put his hands around his head. I guess he was an empath, like Jim from the Empath. But I, of course, wrote that if that doesn't look straight up like a Vulcan mind meld.
Right. And so, I mean, I noticed in the credits, though, as well, that Robert Kinoshita was the art director for this. Are you familiar with him, Veronica?
No.
Robert Kinoshita designed probably the two best mid-century sci-fi robots, Robbie the Robot and the Robot from Lost in Space.
Okay.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything on this one that struck me as being as memorable as that, but he's a big name. He's someone that sci-fi fans are very familiar with. So I mean, Bob Justman, Rob Kinoshita, Mark Daniels, like they're putting the dream team together for this thing, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I do think that with both of them, again, what I felt from both of these is they both came off like first passes. They both seemed like they needed just one more, because there was a curious lack of music, a curious lack of a soundtrack, and it almost again almost felt like they were previewing this, and then they said, okay, we got. Again, since it is Roddenberry Company, I did think a couple things they did were kind of cool. I thought the stems were actually a cool idea. Okay. There's that movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report, where they actually had something called a stick, and they would hit you with it. It would instantly make you throw up. Right. And I thought the concept of the stem was cool. And then, of course, the sub show that stays with me. That stayed with me for decades, because that's something. He Who Shall Not Be Named has actually worked on a project called Hyperloop. But that's the thing people have talked about for generations. If you could dig tunnels underground and make them basically vacuums, and then use magnetic levitation, you could conceivably get a vehicle up to close to the speed of sound. Mm-hmm. Just don't build it on a fault line, and it would actually be more efficient than planes and stuff. I love the shuttle.
I remember thinking when the shuttle first came into that little like docking area, I was like, "Oh, that looks like a ride at Disney World."
Yeah, I thought that chamber was pretty. The production values on that was pretty good. And that was something they introduced in the first one, but they really elaborated on it a little bit more in the second one. That there's this network that just PAX has the access to. Mm-hmm. So these guys have the access to travel around, from week to week, wherever, all over North America, probably. Yep. So I think that conceit was pretty good. Although, I mean, with the earthquakes and the nuclear wars and stuff, like that thing's going pretty fast. Like, is somebody checking these tunnels to make sure we don't have any collapses? Because you don't want to come around the corner and find out that the tunnels collapse. That thing was booking.
Yeah, because in the map they showed them to Australia even, so they were
it's worldwide.
Yeah, they showed them to Australia and Europe, so they went even across the ocean. Which, to your point, that's a heck of an engineering feat to do something like that.
Yeah. I don't know that I would trust that thing. Maybe when it's new, but not after a nuclear war in 150 years. And I started off this adventure in an earthquake. I'm probably not jumping in the super maglev train that's flying that fast underneath the ground. I don't. Unless they've got really good sensors on that thing, they don't want to break.
Yeah. Another reason I thought maybe both shows probably could have used a little pass. Maybe it was just how Roddenberry and them did it, was sometimes the acting was kind of flat, like the reaction. Like for Genesis 2, we never got a reaction from Alex Cord about the fact that he was in the far future. I mean, there was never that standard, oh my God, my family. He's like, okay. And he had sex with Lyra Ah, and he was fine. And it was weird. I was waiting for that.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're in the future, your society and everything you've ever known is gone. And then Marietta Hartley comes out and he's like, okay, cool.
He got distracted.
What are you doing for dinner?
The guy that you were looking for, the doctor, standard Star Trek trope that the guy had exactly like 16 hours for his heart when he was going to die. I love the way Star Trek can pinpoint when you're going to die of heart condition. But when Dylan was trying to sex up what's her name, Marg, and he was just standing there, and even his acting was also low key. He was just standing there. And he's like, "Hey, who's he?" Or no, he was kissing the other girl, Hooper, when they were kissing, when he'd have the medicine applied to him. And that other, here you go, Charles, the other weird Roddenberry thing where she basically starts making out with him, and that was basically allowing him to fight the drug. And that was, is it helping? It's helping, mistress. Is it helping? Okay. And then he just shows up and he's just kind of standing there really emotionless. And I did like when Dylan said, "Why are you still here?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm working on a plan to put the antidote in the gruel." I don't know when he was going to do it if Dylan hadn't shown up, though.
Right. Yeah, like biding your time there. He's been there for a while.
Yeah. What's going on? Now, I did also an interesting commentary, which is it's still disturbing, but again, this happened. You got to point to real life with possibly Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson and others. Many times in American slavery, there were white slave owners and black kind of sort of lived together. And I mean, you can't ever call it equal because it wasn't. But I thought it was interesting that one lady had not drugged her men, and her servant / husband was there willingly. And And even at the end, they said, we're going to try to make it work without the drug. What does that really mean? That's a tough one.
For one, I'm not doing all the chores. You know what I mean? If there's nothing in the gruel.
Yeah.
I'll do some of them. I'll do my part.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So Mark commented, Robbie is the hardest working robot in the business. Veronica, what did you think of these? You watched these fresh for the first time in the past couple of days. What do you think?
Genesis 2 did not hold my attention very well.
Okay.
But Planet Earth was more engaging.
Okay.
And I liked how it was kind of a continuation of the other one, basically.
Okay.
I wish they would have been able to keep more of the same characters and actors between the two. But Keith, they were meant to be PvP pilots.
Yeah, Keith, you watched it originally back when they aired, and now having revisited them now, how do you think they hold up?
They're 100% of their time. And so I actually think they're fine. They're enjoyable. I don't mean to be flip, but I could watch Planet Earth before Section 31 again, honestly.
Right.
Because as you said, John Saxon was a screen presence. I mean, he just held this. He was good. And then of course you got Dinah Muldaur. She was really good. I mean, it's not funny, but like when he first talked to her, she whacked him. I mean, I did laugh, even though that should be personally offensive. But when she's like, eyes down, and I thought that was kind of funny. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was also a very interesting thing, and I think this is probably a conscious choice. There was no black people in Planet Earth, and when you listen to them selling them, and when you listen to them talking about men for breeders, I will be honest, if I'd seen that, I probably would have had a much different reaction. So I'm sure they were like, yeah, let's not do that. Let's not go. And there was not a black man in that entire show. I looked everywhere. There wasn't a black man anywhere. And when I think if they start talking about breeders and stuff, I don't think that would have landed well.
Right. No. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's certainly fun elements of these to watch. I thought they both drug. I mean, I think they both could have been shorter than they were. I didn't mean drug as in the guys were drugged. I mean, like they're dragged. But I mean, as Gene Roddenberry's follow-up to Star Trek, I don't think either of these fits the bill. You know, neither of these was going to be the next Star Trek. You know, which it stinks. I mean, the thing about Star Trek, I think that worked so well was, for one, yes, the universe and the adventures are captivating, but it's the characters really grab you. You know, and I didn't really feel grabbed by any of these characters, although there were actors in there that I liked. I mean, maybe John Saxon's Dylan Hunt would probably be the closest. I thought he was a good lead, but he really, I think, needed a stronger ensemble. Although, you know, the lady,
Harper.
Harper. I thought those two make a good pair. I would like to see those two on more adventures. Ted Cassidy, I love. The Comanche thing ain't working. Let's lose that, please. But no, we made an attempt a couple years ago to watch through Andromeda. We made it very easily through Robert Hewitt Wolf's section of Andromeda, and then it went over a cliff, and
I couldn't take it.
Veronica could not continue with it. But
Veronica, I will tell you, this is one time I'll tell somebody: if two shows that come from the same mind, Earth Final Conflict and Andromeda, if you don't finish them, you ain't missing nothing, because they are both really good. First season, maybe two, and when they drop off, they just go bad. I mean, they're truly bad.
Yeah, but in Andromeda, they took up some of the ideas from this, including the character name of Dylan Hunt, but moved it into a sci-fi setting. Wayne had a comment here that says, wow, this has been fun. I hope you guys cover the other Roddenberry pilots. And that's the intent. We didn't want to cram them all into one episode, but we're going to revisit this topic. I would love to get to the Questor tapes, Strange New World. There's more to cover here of Roddenberry's 70s output. But yeah, this has been fun. These were really fun to revisit.
Questor tapes, if I'm not mistaken, the android was played by Robert Worth, who later to show up in Deep Space Nine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'll be very interested to see Questor tapes again. I remember enjoying that quite a bit. But again, I was like 7, 8, 9 years old when this stuff came out. So we'll see how it holds up.
Right. Well, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerd.com.
That's right. And if you're in the Atlanta area, come to the Puck and Puppet Show. I think it's February 22nd, if that's the Saturday. Yeah, we'll be performing there, and alongside some really great actors. I mean, performers. They're actors too, but really great puppeteers and stage performers will be in that show with us. And yeah, we've got some other stuff coming up that we've got on the books that we'll be announcing soon. But stay tuned. You can follow Felt Nerdy across social media for our all ages, puppetry, comedy, things like that. Felt Nerdy and Dirty for our more adult content. And where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
It's the Dinks.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Joining us live on Thursday evenings. We go live on YouTube at 8 p.m. Eastern, talking about here coming up. It'll be Legacy Star Trek topics until Strange New Worlds comes back. And you can find it after the fact, either on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform in audio form. Thanks for everybody. And it's been a lot of fun.
Have a good one.